Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to Breakfast in the Class. It's so wonderful to see everyone except for Sammy Sutton. We miss you, Sammy Sutton. Where are you? When I was growing up, there was a line that said, "Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?" I don't know if you guys remember that. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? That was actually a kind of a children's game and then turned into a little show, right, where you learned a little bit about geography, which I clearly was not paying attention, Nathan Lowe. Hazaku Baruch. But Sammy, we miss you, and I think you're in Palm Springs now, just to tell you how the synagogue is not the same without you in the Beit Knesset. We miss you. Everybody here wishes you back. And the toaster, by the way, has not been on fire for ages. So Fadal, come on back, stick some cheese in there, let's go. The Breakfast in the Class is dedicated for the speedy and complete of Hashem of Rabbi Chana Farhi Chana Bat Sima Fega Be'ezat Hashem Bekarov Mamash. Rabbi Eli Abadi Alev Shemam Ben Mazal Fortuné, dedicated loving memory of Joseph Kezri Lunishpat Yosef Ben Rachel, sponsored by his loving sons Gabby and Jimmy Kezri. As well, dedicated loving memory of Ms. Lil Sefer Lunishpat Leah Bat Chana, whose philanthropy has reached so many and continues to reach so many throughout the entire world. And sponsored by David E. Ash in honor of you and your substantial capacity to do today and every day, Be'ezat Hashem, we should be zocheh to do so. Okay, my friends, let us begin. The Pasuk tells us that Moshe Rabbeinu sent these spies into Eretz Israel. The spies come back and they give a negative report. The people are crying. They want to go back to Egypt. And at that moment, the decree is sealed. You don't want Israel? No problem. You're not getting Israel. That's how the Parashah goes. There's an amazing conversation that was recorded by Rabbi Aryeh Levine, the Tzaddik of Yerushalayim. Rabbi Aryeh Levine mentioned, he sent over from one of his very, very close friends, who was a tremendous Tzaddik and Talmid Chacham, whose name was Rav Yaakov Kelmes. He was asked one time, he was on the Beit Din of Rav Tzvi Pesach Frank. He was asked one time when he was living back in his hometown by a certain maskil, a person who was an antagonistic, anti-religious guy that got up in his face. And he tells him, what's with this generation in the desert? Always complaining about something. Complaining about Israel, they're complaining about the man, they're complaining about they don't have meat, they're complaining about water, they just don't stop complaining. What kind of people are these? Terrible people. Anyway, the rabbi looks at this guy and he says to him, I'll tell you the truth. He says, I don't see in my life someone walking around complaining to everybody they meet in the street about all their life's problems. Clearly, Rav Kelmes did not live in 2023 in America. But he says, you don't see people running around crying, kvetching, complaining to everyone, to every stranger in the street. But when it comes time and you go home and you're sitting with your dad, you're sitting with your family, you're sitting with your best friend, what happens? In those moments, when you're with someone who's so close to you, you open your heart and you tell them what's bothering you. And by the way, when you speak to your dad or your best friend or your wife or your husband, you only complain about big things. You also complain about the fact that you went to the cleaners and you picked up your shirts and they had the wrong shirt. They didn't give you back your shirts. Your husband understands, I'm so sorry, honey, that you schlepped all the way to the cleaners and you came back and now you have to go back again. I'm sorry. That's what it's like when you love someone and someone loves you. The rabbi looked this guy right in the eye, to this anti-religious, antagonistic, cynical guy, who the only pasuk in the Torah he wants to talk about is the pasuk which denigrates the Jewish people. That's what he wants to talk about, that denigrates religious Jews. He looks at this guy and he says, for you to complain to God about these things doesn't make sense, because you don't complain to strangers about things that are going on in your life. But the people who lived in the time of the Midbar, their relationship with God was like what Moshe Rabbeinu described. Ka'asher yisaha omeret hayonek, like a mother lifts a crying baby, that she takes care of their every need, of their every whim. And yes, that child is going to say to his mother, Ma, the hot cocoa is not hot enough. He's going to say to his mother, I can't find the right. So that closeness actually allows for the honesty of being able to say that there's something here which hurts, which is inconvenient, which is not the right thing. You wouldn't understand that because you don't have such a relationship with God, nor do you want it. But he says, but I see something in this complaining which is also beautiful. That's what the rabbi told this fellow. Now, I remember reading this and I was blown away. What a generous perspective to have. Because when we look at the Torah, what are we seeing? Complaint after complaint after complaint after complaint. Negative story after negative story after negative story. They say that Rav Moshe Feinstein was once pacing back and forth in his house. And he was very perturbed. So the students came to him and they were like, Rabbi, what's bothering? What's everything okay? And he's like, he goes, it's driving me crazy. What's driving you crazy? He says, how could a people that was given so much by God all the time, how could they have been in such a negative state of mind? How could they have made the mistakes? How could they have sinned with the egel? How could these things have happened? Pacing back and forth till finally his face lit up. And he said, and he quoted the pasuk from Tehillim where the pasuk says, Arba'im shana akut bedor. 40 years did I fight with the generation. Va'omar am to'eh levavhem. And I said, they are a people to'eh levav, whose heart is turned, is lost. But he said maybe what the pasuk means to say is to'eh levav, is they got lost or their heart was turned levav because of love. Because of love they were turned. The egel was born from what? From a panic that the Jewish people had, that God forbid their connector, their conduit, Moshe Rabbeinu, the one who connected them to God, was not there. So they made a terrible mistake, the mistake of the egel, a terrible mistake, a mistake we're still paying for. My friends, but where did the mistake come from? From a desire to be connected to God, from a panic that it can't be that we will lose that connection. How crazy is that? Eretz Israel. Our rabbis tell us that the spies did not want to go into Eretz Israel. Why did they not want to go into Eretz Israel? What was the reason? How come they came back with a negative report? And the Chachamim tell us that they came to Eretz Israel and they saw this big fruit and they brought it back. Now I have a question for you. Do you think that the spies wanted the Jewish people to go into Eretz Israel or not? Did they want to go or did they not want to go? What would they have rather? Sorry? Not go, right? So imagine we're sitting here strategizing and all of us are the Meraglim. Guys, we got to convince the Jewish people not to go into the land of Israel. What are we going to do? Now imagine one guy says, I know, brilliant idea. Let's show them how awesome the fruits are. What a terrible decision. Now you could come up with answers. You know what? The only way you could sell a lie is if there's some truth in it. Yeah, but you know what? The Jewish people didn't know that truth. Number one. Number two, they want to tell everybody how big the people are. So look, shuf, this is the size of a grape. Could you imagine the size of a man? Alternative logic, potential logic that one could imagine. But my friends, I think that there's something much deeper here. What the Meraglim were bringing back to the Jewish people was not on a physical level. What they were saying is, look, you want to know what's going to happen when we go into Eretz Israel? We will live lives that are completely and utterly physical. Look at the size of Gashmiut of Eretz Israel. What do we eat? We don't eat giant grapes. We eat bread that falls from heaven, that comes from God's table. That's what we eat. And by the way, the Gemara tells us that when a person ate the man, they didn't have to go to the bathroom. That was a function of the fact that it was completely nit'akel b'me'av. It was completely absorbed within the intestinal, within the gastroenterological system. Enterological system. Right? The body had exactly what it needed in the man. There was nothing extra. It was a life of complete spirituality. So they come back and they say, we're going to go from nothing extra to the one grape. I always thought to myself, maybe that's what Hashem meant when he said, we should do Birkat HaMazon on a kezayit. Like, you know? Right? Guys, do you understand what I'm saying here? They came back to the Jews and said, Eretz Yisrael is amazing. And by the way, what it's going to produce is amazing. These people, they're bodybuilders. That's who they are. Ki chazaku mimenu. Not that they're too strong for us to defeat. They're very, very strong people. What do we know about the way of Torah? Torah, we say, mateshet kocho shel adam. The person who studies Torah, they do mitzvot, it takes a person's koach. It takes their strength. We pour our strength into Torah. Chelcha, we say leoraita. Rabbi Yochanan said to Resh Lakish, he said, I want you to use that incredible strength that you're using to be a thief and a robber. I want you to use it for Torah. And Resh Lakish ultimately does. Chelcha leoraita. Said the spies, listen, is this what you want? So we look at the spies and we see people who said something that actually resonates with all of us. We can move to America, the land of the free and the land of opportunity. But I will ask you, and I don't know what the answer is to this. I want to ask you, if we had a time capsule and we went back 100 years, and I visited my grandparents in Halab, in Germany, you visited your grandparents in Iraq, Iran, Russia, wherever, Poland, Yemen, Turkey. We all got into this time capsule. Went back to our grandparents and we said, we moved to the land of opportunity. We made huge sums of money. We have magnificent houses. Everything's fantastic. We have complete freedom of religion. And they're listening. And then we told them that 90% of the Jewish people is walking away from Judaism today. Maybe the number now is 85. Or maybe the number is 95, I don't know. But 90% of the Jewish people has walked away from Judaism. The intermarriage rate in America, the land of the free, is above 60 something percent. In other countries, higher. What do you think they'd say about our freedom and our opportunity? Shema Yisrael. We might have a grandfather say to us, you know something? I'd rather you stayed in Syria. I'd rather you stayed in Iraq and Iran and in Yemen. I'd rather you stayed there. And then God forbid, we told them, yeah, but what about Israel? And they said to us, and what's the situation over there with regards to Jewish heritage and your Jewish faith? And we were forced to share with them that the numbers in Israel might not be much better. Intermarriage might be less because there's less opportunity. But the number of people and where things are going is not. Could you imagine that our grandparents might say to us, I talked it over with your grandma, and we'd rather you stayed here. Could you imagine that? That is wild to think. But I can imagine someone saying that. You know? And don't get me wrong. You know, there's been tremendous persecution in many of the countries that we've left. But Rabbi Sachs used to famously say that we've lost more Jews to intermarriage times 3 than we lost, times 2 than we lost in the Holocaust. So just think about that for 1 minute. Is that what the spies were saying to the Jewish people? Eretz ochelet yoshvea. The Gashmiut is incredible. But is it worth it? Once you see this approach from Rav Kelmas, you start to understand that maybe we're looking at this a little bit wrong. Maybe their complaining came from closeness. and maybe the lack of our complaining. Now, I remember once someone telling me, Rabbi, I'm struggling with this, I'm struggling with that. I said, well, you should pray. Are you praying about it? And the person said, pray? I can't pray. What, I'm going to bother God with my problems? When you relate to God as Malkenu, but not Avinu, then it's unfathomable to talk to Him about the fact that you don't have this, or that you need this, or that this is a problem. But when you relate to God as your Father, would you not call your father and tell him you lost your job? Would you not call your father and tell you would? So in a certain sense, we lack the comparative ability to be able to analyze the generation of the Midbar. And the spies are saying something very important. They're saying, guys, we could go, but I'm telling you, it might be a very dangerous situation for the people. Suddenly we start to maybe understand a little bit of what's going on. Am to'eh levavhem. Their heart was in the right place. But my friends, what was the mistake then of the Meraglim? And Ramban, in numerous places in Tanakh, says the same idea. So many of the mistakes in the Torah were caused by someone who had the best intentions. Tzlofchad, good example. He sees keeping of Shabbat is down. People are not treating it with the right respect. He's willing to risk his life to get the punishment for not keeping Shabbat in order to rebuild the fences around Shabbat. Tzlofchad Hashem Shamayim nitkaven, says the Gemara. The Chachamim tell us that Adam and Chava, when they ate from the tree of knowledge, thought to themselves, you know something? If right now we don't have Yetzer Hara inside of us, we're not getting as much merit for doing the mitzvot and listening to God as we would get if we ate from the Etz Hadat. It's a good cheshbon. Moshe Rabbeinu hits the rock. Why does he hit the rock? Gemara tells us, Moshe says, what a kitrug on Am Yisrael. What a claim against the Jews there would be if the rock listens to God when you talk to it, but the Jewish people don't listen to God when you talk to them. If the rock delivers only when you hit it, then there's no complaints. You know why? The Jews also listen when you hit us. We also pray when we're hurting. Moshe sacrificed himself with the best of intentions, and yet he's punished for it. Says Ramban, אין דעת, אין חוכמה, אין תבונה, נגד Hashem. There's no wisdom, and there's no knowledge, and there's no understanding when it comes against what Hashem said. We have a lot of cheshbonot in this world. Maybe like this, maybe like that, gashmiyut, maybe we shouldn't go, maybe it's not the right thing. Lots of cheshbonot. Right? But when God told you to do something, no cheshbon is important. However much sense or logic you think it makes, God told you what to do. That's the right thing to do. What Hashem said. Hashem said, speak to the rock, Moshe, you're not smarter than God. Hashem said to the Jewish people, you're going into Eretz Yisrael, this is where I'm taking you. This is the place where you're going to be blessed. This is the land, this is the gift. The spies come back and they're like, well. And by the way, you know what the spies were saying? Not that God wasn't giving them a beautiful land. What were they saying? Oldest line in the book. It's not you. It's me. I can't handle the blessing you're giving me. Ki chazak hu mimenu. The challenge of Eretz Yisrael is too strong for us to overcome. Hashem says, don't you think I thought of that? So you have times, my friends, when a person makes this cheshbon, a person has this idea in their mind. This is what's going on over here. I think that if I do this, then I'm not going to want to come to shul anymore. So, you know what, I need to regulate my own shul attendance. I don't want to overdo it. Now, again, sometimes that's right, but sometimes you're employing the same faulty logic of for the people in the desert. Rav Kelmis was able to look and to see over here a group of people, a time in history where the Jewish people were very close to God. And we have an example of exactly that, and with this I'll end. The Gemara tells us in Masechet Ta'anit about a time when the Jewish people did not have water, it was a drought. And they went to the rabbis to pray, and the water didn't come. Finally, they go to Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, and Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, who was famous for his powers of prayer, drew a circle around himself. And he said, Ta'akadosh Baruch Hu, Master of the world, your children have come to me to ask me to intercede on their behalf for rain from you. I will not leave this circle until you make it, until it rains. And what happened? It rained. They came back to the rabbi, the great rabbi of the generation, the rabbi of Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa, who had prayed and had not got the answer from God that Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa had got. He said, if not for the fact that Chanina is Chanina, I would excommunicate him for speaking that way to God. I'm not leaving the circle until... But what can I do? He explains to his wife. His wife says, he's your student. You're bigger than him. Why is God answering him and not answering you? And he said, I am like a sar lifnei hamelech. I'm like a minister in the king's court. A minister wants to see the king, he makes an appointment. Chanina is like a servant in the king's court. He comes and goes as he pleases. He sees the king without announcing, without making an appointment. My friends, I read this Gemara and I asked myself a question. Which is better? What was Rabbi Yochanan's answer to his wife? Which is better? Is it okay for Rav Chanina ben Dosa to speak that way to God? Yes and no. Yes and no. But my friends, understanding that the relationship that people have with God is complicated. And a person who has pure gratitude to Hashem and just says, Hashem, everything's great, everything's great, everything's great, might actually be a mask for a lack of a real relationship with God in the first place. They don't feel comfortable enough to open up their hearts. Eshpoch lefanav sichi. Says David HaMelech, I will pour in front of God my words. Tzarati lefanav agid. Everything that hurts me, I'm going to share with him. That can come from a level of closeness. The answer is, it's a yes and a no. A person who doesn't pray, who doesn't complain, anything, nothing at all, that maybe speaks about the fact he doesn't have a close relationship. A person who has a close relationship and takes their complaining seriously enough to the point where it's not about sharing a complaint with someone who's close with you, but it's about being ungrateful, has also missed the boat. En da'at ve'en chokhmah ve'en tevunah neged Hashem. God told you, God gave you, God decreed. Understand, accept, but at the same time, a person should be sharing from a place of complete gratitude, but also from a place of complete love and connection with Hashem, what's going on with him. When we say in Rifa'enu, Hashem, please heal us. Rifa'enu Hashem ne'afeh. Hoshi'enu v'nashea. Kiti latinu v'ale arucha marpeh. Please Hashem, heal. L'chol mach'ovenu. U'l'chol makotenu. Right? Heal us of our sickness. Makotenu, of the fact that we were hit. Chol mach'ov, from our pain. What are we saying to God? We're saying to Hashem, I want you to heal me from my sickness. I want you to heal me from the pain of getting hit. Mach'ovenu. What's the difference between mach'ovenu and makotenu? Aren't they both pain? I understand Hashem, asking Hashem to heal me not only from the sickness, but also from the pain. But what's the difference between mach'ov and makotenu? Don't they both mean pain? And I'm thinking a lot about this as I pray in Rifa'enu. And I think one of the elements that we're saying here to God is, Hashem, I want you to heal me. But you know, sometimes in the process of healing, the thing that's making you better is causing you pain. Sometimes even pain that has nothing to do with the sickness. You break your arm, hurts. While goes by, it doesn't hurt so much. You know what happens when the doctor sets your arm or your shoulder? People pass out from the pain of shifting the bone back. Do you know that? Right? Famous. A person might have a medicine that's making them better, but the medicine might be causing them more pain than the sickness was causing them. Hashem, if making me better is going to cause me the pain of getting better, then Hashem, give me a medicine also for the medicine. My friends, imagine someone gave you a medicine and you complained to him that the medicine that's making you better is hurting you. You ungrateful son of a gun. You know what the answer is? That's correct. Imagine you tell the doctor who did surgery on you, thank you very much, cut me open, make me bleed. The guy's like, I just saved your life. But when it comes to relationship with God that's so close, we ask Hashem and we say, heal me. And now Hashem, heal me from what it took to heal me. Because that level of closeness offers a level of honesty. So when a person is speaking that way and it comes from the right place, then, but with the spies, it came from almost the right place. They're worried about the future, but they weren't worried about the future and sharing it with God and saying, so therefore God, help us go into Eretz Israel. What was their response? Nitna rosh ve'nashuva mitzrayma. Let's appoint the head and go back to Egypt. Now already, you're not sharing with God, you're not working with God, you're outsmarting God and working against Him. At that point, everything goes off the rails. How do we share in our prayers, in our hopes, in our dreams, that we're with Him? That we're buying into the nisayon, to the difficulty that we're in. Hashem, I accept what you're putting me through. Everything that you do is for the best. There could be no better scenario than the scenario I'm in. And yet I'm praying for you to change my scenario. Isn't that what we do? A person has tremendous emunah. Hashem, I believe everything's for the best. So why are you praying to Hashem to change it? You know why? Because when you love Hashem, and you know Hashem loves you, you know that where you are, if you're hurting, is not where He wants you to be. You might need to be there, but you're asking Hashem, if I need to be healed, Hashem, provide me with a medicine that's also going to help the pain I'm feeling from being healed. What they should have said is, Chazaku mimenu. Hashem, please help us be people that can overcome the temptation of becoming people like the people in Eretz Israel. But at that point, their closeness actually obfuscated their understanding that God would always only ever do the very best for them. And they started planning against Borei Olam in terms of pulling the people away from God's vision. Hashem should bless us always to see and to experience His brachot. And Be'ezat Hashem, it should be complete beracha, both hidden and revealed. Baruch Adonai Le'olam.